Obsidian Flames is the next set in the Pokemon trading card game, and I want to take a look at all of the Pokemon EX coming to us in August. Hey, Nick from 9card TCG, and today I am making a tier list of all the Pokemon EX coming to us from Obsidian Flames. I made this tier list myself, so you can go and do the tier list in, if you want to do your own. Link in the video description, as well as to justinbasil.com, where I got these images and all the translations for these cards. So all that in the video description. Do keep in mind, this is first impression. Some of these I'm reading for the first time. Some of them I know what they do and have played with them. There's also one EX that has not been revealed. That's Vespiqueen EX. Don't know what it does yet, so it's not obviously on the list, but I'll probably make a comment about it at some point in the future when we do see it. Knowing TPCI, or TPC, whatever, it will probably be revealed like the day or so after I post this video, so that's always fun. First up, we have Absol, and I think Absol, it's pretty good, right? The first attack is Future Sight for just a single dark energy. You look at the top 3 cards of either player's deck and then put them back in any order, which is kind of cool. If you have a top deck you need, you can make sure it happens. If your opponent has a top deck they want, you can make sure it doesn't happen, which is kind of cool. And then you have another attack for double dark colorless, and it's Cursed Slug. That name's definitely going to get changed. 100 damage. If your opponent has 3 or fewer cards in the hand, it does an extra 120. It's alright, 3 energies to do 220. If your opponent has 3 or fewer cards, you can make this happen with things like Iono, and I'm sure there's other hand disruption cards you can make happen with this. But it's in niche tier because it is a basic, which is good for what you want to do with it, but not many people are going to make a ton of use out of this ever. It's expected to be very control oriented, and there's very specific individuals who use things like control. So Charizard, I think Charizard, I'm just going to come out and say it, I think it's the best, probably one of the best EXs from the entire, honestly probably the best cards in the entire set. You have Infernal Rain as our ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, search your deck for up to 3 basic fire energies and attach them to any of your Pokemon in any way you want. It's such a crazy good ability. That means you evolve a single Charmander or Charmeleon into a Charizard. You can get 3 energies out of your deck, and then you attach return. You got 4 energies. That means you can power up 2 Charizard EXs in a single turn, or a Charizard EX and an Entei, or something. It's really powerful. And your attack for 2 fire energies, which really good synergy, says you do 180 damage plus 30 more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. That means you're in the early game, you're 2-shotting everything, and in the late game, you're 1-shotting everything. That's really, really good. 330 health. You have really good typing for dark. You're weak to grass. It's not a lot. I think it's incredibly good. Next, we have the Clefable EX. It's niche, right? The ability, what is it called? Lunar Zone. Each of your Pokemon has any psychic energy attached to it, has no retreat cost. It's a stage 1, and the thing about this is, I mean, a lot of Lost Zone decks will play a psychic energy, so that's kind of cool. You can attach a psychic energy to a Comfey, and it has no retreat cost. But if you attach a psychic energy to a Comfey, so it has no retreat, you could have just discarded that psychic energy, and now you still retreated. So, plus things like Gardevoir, you don't really care about not having retreat cost because you can just accelerate energies from the discard to one of your active Pokemon, and then you retreat those energies going to the discard. Whatever you promote, you just use Psychic Embrace to send more energies to your active Pokemon, and you just discarded energies from retreating, so you have those energies to accelerate. It just doesn't seem super useful. Your attack for 3 Psychic Energies, Wondrous Moon, does 170 damage, and then you move any number of Psychic Energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way you want. Again, Psychic Embrace just lets us move energies from the discard wherever we want, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty good. I just don't see this being played very much. Decidueye EX, I think, is pretty decent. It's a stage 2, 320 health, grass, right? The ability is very interesting. Total freedom. Once during your turn, you may move this Pokemon from your active spot to the bench, or from the bench to the active, which is kind of nice. So one of the reasons I like this is because of something like Gardenia's Vigor, since we can attach up to 2 grass energies from our hand to one of our benched Pokemon. Now we can have the Decidueye EX on the bench, use the Gardenias to accelerate energies to the Decidueye, and then use the ability Total Freedom to just go right into the active, which is really cool. Or we can use something like Cheryl, for example, onto the active. We get rid of those energies, and then we can use the ability to move it to the bench for free without having to worry about retreat costs or anything like that, which is really, really nice. We don't have to worry about things that trap our opponent, like our Pokemon in the active, like stadiums that say, like, your retreat cost is 1 extra, or like Spidos, your retreat cost is 1 extra. We don't really care. We just get the ability to get to do it for free. Pretty cool. Hunting Arrow for grass and colors works perfectly with Gardenias, which is just 1 Gardenias, boom, we're powered up. 130 damage, and it also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. It's okay, right? 130 is not really a lot. So you're going to be 2-shotting a lot of things, 3-shotting most things. So that 30 damage can be kind of nice to soften things up on the bench. I'm not... The reason why it's in, like, playable is because it's playable. I just don't think it's very good. Dragonite's bad. Dragonite's just bad. It's coming from a starter deck. It does 70 damage, and then the attack does 140 flip a coin. It does an extra 140 for lightning water. And I think if it's tails, you can't attack during your next turn. It's a stage 2, doing 140 damage 50% of the time. It's just not good. Another niche card is the Eiscue EX. That's a fire type Pokemon. It's one of the few Terra Pokemon that are different types than normal. This is a Fire Eiscue, which is kind of cool. It's a basic, which is also nice, but the attack is a little lackluster. For 3 water energies, it does 160 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't attack. But there's a lot of ways we can get around that. We just retreat into something else. A lot of decks play things like escape ropes. Like Lugia has no problem retreating. Gardevoir has no problem retreating. Lost Zone decks have a ton of switch outs. So, like, there's very few instances where that attack will really work. We would need something to trap our opponent's Pokemon in the active a little bit better, to really just keep hitting them so that, and then they can't attack, and but 3 energies is a lot to ask for. I'm pretty sure Baxcalibur can. I don't think Baxcalibur requires you to go to water Pokemon, so that's kind of cool. So you can use Baxcalibur to power this thing up, and then you hit fire type Pokemon for weakness. Or you hit like grass for weakness, which is, I guess, is kind of cool in some weird way, but whatever. We're going to jump around a little bit. Victini is bad. 190 health is very, very squishy for a 2-prize Pokemon that's not a support Pokemon, right? Like Squawkabilly and Lumineon have 160, 170 health, but they're support Pokemon, so like you kind of are okay with it. This thing is meant to attack. Strafe does 30 damage. You can switch it to the bench if you want. And then Victory Flame for 3 fire energies does 220. For 2 fire energies on Charizard, we're doing 180, maybe 300, depending on how many prizes our opponent has taken. This does 220, and then we can't even attack next turn for a very squishy 2-prize. I don't know. I just don't like it. I think it's bad. Another Pokemon that's, I think, pretty bad. We'll just go Klawf. The ability is kind of cool. The ability says every time this Pokemon takes damage from an attack, you discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon, which is really, really cool. Sometimes things like Gardevoir don't care. Lost Box might not care that much. Lugia might not care that much, depending on the energy that you're discarding. It just doesn't really. Plus, again, 220. It's really easy to KO you, so you're giving up 2 prizes to discard an energy. It just doesn't feel very good. Your attack does 100 damage for a fighting double colorless. Flip a coin. 50% of the time, it's going to do 80 more. It's just, there's no real good way to power it up, and then why use it even in the active? I'm sure in some capacity, this could be used with like an Absol in some type of control stall deck. Every time it takes damage, you're going to discard an energy and you just prevent it from getting KO'd somehow or heal it somehow. But 220 is just not enough health. I guess this Bravery Charm brings it up to 270, but it's still pretty easy to KO as far as most things are concerned. Champao can KO it, Gardevoir can KO it, Lugia can KO it. Some of the most popular decks in the game have no real problem with dealing with it. Another just straight up bad Pokemon is this Melmetal EX. Again, these things come from like starter decks, or the Klawf's like a gym promo, so you don't expect them to be very good. The Melmetal has an attack for a single fight metal energy. You get to search a deck for 2 metal energies and attach it. Assuming you don't just instantly get KO next turn, which might be a little hard. You're a stage 1 Pokemon with 300 health. That's really good. Your next attack does 90 damage, and for 4 metal energy, or 4 colorless energies, you do 30 more for each metal energy attached. I might as well just use Dialga V-Star. Dialga V-Star does so much more damage, and it just works a little bit better, I think. You have a really good V-Star power, and being able to take an entire another turn. That's something that this does not have at all. You're just not doing enough damage. I think you're doing like 210 damage with 4 metal energies. So that means you have to attach for turn, use the attack, you get 2 energies out of the deck, now you have 3. Now if you don't get KO'd, you can go ahead and attach for turn and do 210 damage. And then you still don't have another Pokemon powered up whatsoever ready to go, it's really bad. This is playable. It's not very good. Koraidon does for a fighting energy 20 damage, I think it is, and then it does 20 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which is pretty good. And then your other attack does 230, and you do 30 to yourself. I want to confirm that very quickly because I don't feel confident that I'm correct. Yeah, I was correct. It's not very good. I think there's a Houndoom EX that's not on this list for some reason that I absolutely forgot about, so we'll just talk about it very quickly. 2 dark energies, 90 damage. The defended Pokemon, if it's a basic, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. It's kind of cool. Again, very easy to get around that. A lot of stuff's evolving now. There's not a ton of basic Pokemon attacking outside of like Lost Box, but again, they just switch card, all that kind of stuff. Not really a big deal. Triple Dark does 220 and it does 30 to itself. It only has 270. It's not good. It would be put into bad probably, or maybe niche for the first attack, maybe if I'm being generous, but I don't think we have to worry about it too much. A card that just got revealed today that I think is pretty playable is the Glimmora EX, and for 2 real reasons. First is the ability Dust Field. Both you and your opponent, as long as this Pokemon's in the active, can't have more than 3 Pokemon on the bench. And if you do have more than 3 Pokemon, you discard Pokemon until you have 3 remaining, which is great. This is a really good way of blocking off what your opponent wants to do. A lot of decks want to go wide. Lost Zone has a big bench. Gardevoir has a big bench. Mew has a big bench. Lugia, even though it doesn't always want a large bench, tends to just have one. Pao often has a wide bench or a large bench. So like a lot of these decks are going to have bigger benches. And now Glimmora just says, forget about all that. It does have to be in the active, which is a little annoying because then you can't pair it with Ting Lu to really like lock abilities and also prevent your opponent from benching new Pokemon to use their abilities. So the fact that they both have to be in the active really, really hurts. But this is a stage 1 Pokemon. It evolves from Glimmette. The Glimmette from Obsidian Flames has Ascension, which means if you go first, or if you go second on your first turn, you can have the Glimmette in the active, attach an energy, Ascension, and now your opponent starts the game basically with 3 bench spots, which is pretty cool. It's all, even if you go first, you just Glimmette, boom. This can get played around pretty easily with boss and escape ropes, so that's why it's playable and not very good. If you notice, we really haven't had anything that's like very good. Most of the stuff is playable, niche at best, and then quite a few things that are bad. Speaking of another bad card, I think this is probably one of the better of the bads, but it's still pretty bad. 220 health, Miraidon does 20 damage. You get to draw 2 cards, and then on the other attack does like 150. Attach a basic lightning energy from your discard to one of your benched Pokemon. It's okay. I just rather I'm looking at my phone to confirm that that's what the attack does. But I rather just use Flaffy, right? Like it's 150. And attach a basic lightning energy from your discard to one of your bench Pokemon. I'd rather just use Flaffies and get a better attack going. So, whatever. While I'm in the lightning section, we might as well talk about the Pawmot, which I actually think is pretty playable. I think the Pawmot's pretty good. You can build a deck around it. It might not be the best deck, or you can include it in a lightning deck. Again, might not be the best inclusion, but it's still workable. Stage 2, 300 health. You're weak to fighting. There's not a ton of fighting going around outside of like Single Strike Lugia. That's pretty much the only fighting. Maybe the random Tinglu occasionally, but you get hit with a Tinglu, you're in a lot of trouble. 60 damage for just 1 lightning energy is pretty good. You have free retreat, and that's going to be important in a second. Your other attack, what is it called? Lightning Strike. Discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon, and then you do 220 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. You could choose the active, or you could choose a bench Pokemon, which is really nice. So you can use something like the Lightning Strike, or Zap Kick, or whatever it is. Yeah, Zap Kick to do 60, and then Lightning Strike 220, and now you're knocking out most stage 1 EXs, you're knocking out all, the Pokemon V Star, all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. The math lines up there. If your opponent Pokemon runs to the bench, you can go ahead and Lightning Strike it on the bench. You can go ahead and, just target things down on the bench, soften them up, which is really nice. You can boss up a Manaphy, cancel and clone, still hit them with a Lightning Strike. There's things we can do to get around Manaphy. I think it's pretty nice. And the best part about this is we can use Lightning Strike. We have to discard those 2 lightning energies. Well, now if we have another Pawmot on the bench, we can use our Flaffies to accelerate the energies to the benched Pawmot. Pawmot has free retreat, so we can just retreat into the new Pawmot and then attach for turn, and now we can start to get this other Pawmot ready to go for the following turn after we Lightning Strike, retreat, all that kind of stuff. So there is some playability, some free retreats, always nice. But I don't think it's very good. It's playable. I think Mabostiff's going to be niche at best, and I'm being generous with this because of the attack Daunt for 2 colorless energies. It does 30 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, the defender Pokemon's attacks do 50 less. However, we're not doing a lot of damage. We're doing 30 damage. We have 260 health. I'm just not crazy about it. If we're going to do something that's going to be damage reduction, I'd rather just do Susumi and Goodra, right? It's going to do way more damage, and we get to take less damage during our opponent's next turn. We take 80 instead of 50, so that's pretty good. The attack Pride Fang does 100 damage. If your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on it, we do an extra 120. 3 energies to do 220 damage on a stage 1 prize, 2 prize Pokemon it's just not good enough. But maybe there's something with that attack. I'm going to call it niche, even though I think it's pretty bad. We'll go with the Revaroom next, and I think Revaroom is playable. I don't think it's very good, but it's playable, right? And the reason it's playable is because of the ability tune-up, where you can have up to 4 Pokemon tools on this thing. However, why would I really want to have 4 tools on a stage 1 Pokemon where I have Honchkrow if I'm trying to pair it like something like Pachirisu, which says I do more damage based on the number of tool cards I discard from my Pokemon? Well, Honchkrow is a basic, and I don't have to worry about evolving and whiffing, a Pokemon that I can't put tools onto or put multiple tools onto. So I probably wouldn't use it for the ability like that. Although we can go, you can't even use Bravery Charm because it's not a basic. You can put Bravery Charm on the Honchkrow, now it gets 50 extra health, and that's pretty cool. You can't do that on the Revaroom, so I lose like 10 HP, but I'm still a basic Pokemon. I'd rather take that trade. Wild Drift, 2 metal, and the Collis does 170 during your opponent's next turn. This Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks. It's not really worth using 2 metal and a Collis. 170 damage of 2-shotting everything. Sure, you're going to take 30 less damage, so you might survive an attack, but I just don't really know how we're powering this thing up super easily. You can't use something like Arceus because it's not a Pokemon V. I'm just not a fan. Again, it's probably bad, maybe even niche. Niche isn't like a bad thing, by the way. It's just not going to see a lot of play. It's going to see play in like very specific things. I should just make that kind of clear. Well, I guess we'll talk about Greedent. Greedent's not good. It's really not good. Get greedy. I'm just gonna immediately put it into bad. Get greedy. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may put those into your hand or discard them and draw 3. It's a hop. Maybe it's a little bit better than a hop if I discard the 3. But now it's my attack. It's my attack. I don't know. And then the other one, Foolish Rolling, 210 during your next turn. The Pokemon can't use Foolish Rolling. That's for 3 colorless energies. Yeah, I could attach turn 1 and then attach turn 2 with like a DTE or something, and I'm hitting for 190, but and then I can't do it next turn. It's just not good. Why don't we talk about something that is very good, and that is the Toedscruel EX. It's the first Pokemon I'm putting into the A tier, and we have 3 remaining. That's not very good for the set. But the reason it's very good is the ability Protective Filament that says your Pokemon that have any energy attached to it, they can't be targeted by the effects of attacks on your opponent's Pokemon. What does that mean? It means Sableye can't put damage counters on your Pokemon that have energy attached to it. It's the same exact ability as Solar Revelation on Espeon VMAX, except now it's a stage 1 Pokemon EX, so it's only worth 2 prizes instead of 3. It has less health, and that's kind of the trade-off. It's less health, but it's only 2 prizes. So which do you prefer? They both get turned off by Path to the Peak, so that's not a big deal. However,
Ting Lu can turn off something like the SBI can't turn off the protective filament on the Toedscruel, even though if you're playing Ting Lu, you don't really have to worry about something like using Toedscruel. Greninja EX, I'm going to call probably the best bad card. It's a stage 2, it has 300 health. Ninja Shuriken for a colorless energy does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's cool, but a lot of decks are running Manaphy, sometimes they even running 2 Manaphy, so you might not even get to use it onto a bench Pokemon. And then for 2 water energies, Raging Rapid Strike does 120 damage, and if your opponent's active already has any damage counters on, it does an additional 120. So if we use Ninja Shuriken onto the active to do 40, now Raging Rapid Strike does 240, that's 280, we're hitting some good numbers there. I just don't know if it's really worth having to do, because if our opponent retreats into something else or plays anything that heals, then our attack only does 120, and that's not very good. I'm sure you could pair this with something like Hawlucha, Radiant Alakazam. You could do all that kind of nonsense to ensure your opponent's active has damage counters on them, and then use things like Radiant Greninja, or Radiant Alakazam rather, and Hawlucha to like fix any math and make sure you're getting KOs. I don't know if it's worth it. I guess maybe we could put it into the playable. It's technically playable. You can build a deck around it. You could throw it back Excalibur and Irida, all that kind of stuff, and it'll work and it'll run. It'll run. I just don't know how good it'll be. Maybe we should have had like an extra tier for like playable, but why? And I feel like a lot of these would fall into playable, but why? Like this is playable, right? But like, why would you do it? I'm actually gonna move the Koraidon down to bad. It's like you could play it, but why? Houndstone is next, and I think it's pretty playable. You're really using it for the last respects. It does 160 damage for Psychic Double Colors, which is not bad. We can easily power this up with something like Shining Arcana Gardevoir EX, so the energy isn't a problem. However, it does 160 plus 10 more damage for each Psychic Pokemon you have in your discard. So it's like, yeah, I could use something like this. I get 3 energies on it, so I attach return. I put 2 energies with Gardevoir EX. I only take 40 damage, so I have 220 health left, the same amount as like a Zacian V. But then I have to have energies, Pokemon in my discard, instead of having energies in my discard to accelerate. So like you could be like, oh, well, later in the game, I'm going to have a bunch of Psychic Pokemon in the discard, and I could just do a bunch of damage. But like, if you had 10 Psychic Pokemon in the discard, you're doing 260, which is a good number, right? If you have 11, you're going to do even more. You have to really take some one-shots, you're going to have quite a few Pokemon in the discard. I just don't know how useful you'll find it, but I guess it's something, right? Again, it's another playable, but like, why? You probably just use Gardevoir. This is a stage. It's not even. If this is a basic, I'd say yeah, I'm for it. It's pretty good. But being a stage 1 just is like, I have to fill my deck with at least a 1-1 or a 2-2 line of the Greavard and Houndstone to make it happen, and then I have to find them at the right times. It's just like 4 extra cards that like I just don't need. I don't think.
Good
Last
news,
card,
everyone.
I'm putting this into very good, and I know again there probably should be another tier so I can separate the playables from like the playable. But why? The reason why I'm putting this in the very good is because I think there's really something there that people aren't seeing yet. You can build this with Aerodactyl V-Star and Path of the Peak and really shut things down. You're using fighting energies, but you have a good typing and lightning to hit Palkias and Lugias for weakness, which is really, really nice. Instead of what they would normally resist the fighting, now you're going to be able to hit them for weakness, at least in Lugia's case. So we have 340 health, that's really good. For our single energy, we hit 120. Yeah, sure, we got to discard the top 2 cards of our deck, but we probably don't care about that too much. For 2 fighting energies, we do 150 damage, and if any of our Pokemon have damage counters on it, we can hit for 100 more. So we're hitting 250, which is nice because with any damage modifier between something like a Choice Belt or a Defiant Band, now we're hitting 280, which is a pretty good number to hit. We could change those numbers with things like Hawluchas and Radiant Alakazams, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I think the better way to play it, at least right now, based on the current meta, is Aerodactyl V-Star, turn off abilities, Path of the Peak. You have things like that. You have the Spiritomb. You can really just slow things down. Hit for 120 constantly. Cheryl, Palpad, Cheryl, Thor's Revenge, which does, like I said, the 250 if one of your bench Pokemon has damage counters on it. We can very easily get damage counters on it with Gengar from Lost Origin, with Gave Draw Bog, with a lot of different stuff. So it's really easy to do, and just by playing the game, your Pokemon will naturally have damage counters on them. You just have to make sure it's on the bench and not your active. That's most likely to take damage. But there's a lot of things we could do with it. I think it's pretty cool. You can go super aggressive like Koraidons and burst a bunch of energies into play with Dino Cry, and now you have these the Tyranitar is already powered up, ready to go, which is great. Again, the Gengar means that we can go ahead and just use the Gengar's ability to ensure that we have a Pokemon with damage counters and we're just hitting really, really hard. I really like this. It's probably not very good, but that's where I'm putting it for now because I'm a little biased. So there you go. All of the EXs minus Vespiqueen from Obsidian Flames. Overall, the set not very good. The best thing we got is the Charizard and the Toedscruel, and I'm going to try to make the Tyranitar work. But overall, a little lackluster. What do you think of the set overall? Are you excited for Obsidian Flames? Do you think it's just kind of a filler set? I want to hear from you in the comments below. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of stuff tells YouTube this is a good channel and other people should watch it. Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.
I want to give a special shout out to the YouTube members Black Wins, Mike the Highest, Fernando Ortiz, Chin Pokemon, and Eric N. Thank you all so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. And if you want to become a channel member, you can go ahead and click the channel member button somewhere at the bottom of the page. I'm not really sure. I haven't done it myself.